The Vancouver Regional Construction Association's 2022 Awards of Excellence Gala will be held at the Vancouver Convention Centre West on Wednesday, October 26th. Over 600 industry peers are expected to attend in order to recognize individual and company achievements and celebrate construction successes together. The awards are also a great opportunity for companies to demonstrate their commitment to quality and professionalism in local construction. For more information or to register, visit vrca.ca/AOE, call 604-293-6595, or email awards@vrca.ca. The VRCA looks forward to celebrating construction's excellence with you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Construction Record Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Angela Gismondi. I'm a staff writer with the Daily Commercial News.
And
John Wall. I'm also a staff writer with the Daily Commercial News. Both of us are in Ontario.
That's right, because in BC last week we had our mayoral races, and now we've got the next batch are coming up in Ontario. So first we're going to talk to Angela about, she talked to some of the key stakeholders about what they want to see, and rather than me guess at it because I'm in BC, how about Angela, you tell me what these stakeholders want when the elections come due at, I think it's Saturday, or is it Friday?
It's on Monday.
Monday, yeah, for Toronto.
October 24th.
See how little I know?
So basically spoke to stakeholders from construction industry, provincial associations mostly, and they're asking for the normal commitment to infrastructure and more housing and transit, but they're also concerned about how the projects are going to get built in the current climate and if there's going to be enough labor to build them. So you've got some supply chain issues, then the labor shortages, rising inflation, and then some projects, including the municipal ones, that are being delayed or they're being canceled as a result of all these factors. So I spoke to Patrick McManus. He's the executive director of the Ontario Sewer and Water Main Construction Association. And he said the big issue with municipal projects is the risk transfer. So he said that contractors are saying increasingly manageable levels of risk are being downloaded into municipal contracts, which are resulting in cost escalation on projects. And the association is asking that elected officials, the people who are elected at the municipal level, need to look at ways to share project risks in the future. So that was a big concern for him and his members. The Residential and Civil Construction Alliance of Ontario Executive Director Nadia Todorova said housing is a major issue, and it's necessary to speed up the development approvals process, get more housing built, and accommodate future growth. So that's a big concern with a lot of the stakeholders, actually, is getting more housing supply to address the housing crisis. For the RCCO, a big part of that includes mobility and getting people and goods moving around. So they're also pushing for Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass to move ahead as well. That's a big issue for them. Richard Lyall, who's the president of the Residential Construction Council of Ontario, said the association's focus is addressing the housing crisis, and they've been doing that. They've been advocating for that, for reforms for a number of years now. So they want to see more measures to streamline the development approvals process and get more homes built. And he said that all levels of government are aware there's a problem, and now it's time for a plan to fix it. So he said that while a lot of people know there's a housing crisis and they know how to fix it, the plan is not actually in place, and how that plan gets implemented is really the important part. So this is interesting as well, because RESCON's board of directors also supported Toronto Mayor John Tory for re-election. So they're backing him in the upcoming election, and they say that they're supportive of his housing plan and the need to implement a development and growth division at the city, which they think will address a lot of these housing problems. So, and I believe we have a clip from him coming up as well.
Okay, so let's roll right into that.
Where things are at with the city of Toronto, I think again, we support the mayor's position. We support the strong mayor's legislation. We certainly think that there are more things to get done as per our suggestions, and certainly in that, in and amongst the 52 recommendations in the task force report. I think many people know it now. It's in the doing, and so the bottom line is, okay, what's the plan, right? So if you were to approach this from a business point of view, and say, okay, we got to build 1.5 million homes in Ontario over the next 10 years. Well, that needs to be broken down into, okay, what does that mean for the city of Toronto? What does it mean for Waterloo region? What is it, and what are the exact numbers there, and what are the targets, and how do we measure success here? And right now and what's the role of the federal government and so on, because there's a social housing component to this that can't be forgotten. Now, the task force report admittedly stated that they didn't really look at it, but they felt it should be looked at and said it would be looked at. Mm-hmm. But you got to pull all these things together. But you got to break it down to the different to the municipal level. So you'd be saying to based on whatever the demographics are and growth forecasts and so on, you'd be saying to the town of Aurora, say, for example, well, this is how many new houses you have to build here. And, because we need the density for many obvious reasons, one of them being, we don't really want sprawl. I mean, look, the Greenbelt is great. Everybody supports it. But the odd thing is, without the allowances for higher density within the core, we've actually pushed people out beyond the Greenbelt, which has in turn created its own mobility issues, right?
Yeah.
And more sprawl. It's just that we've pushed the sprawl out further, right?
Okay.
The real question is, we have to get more dense. And so, if you look at some of the beautiful cities of the world, I mean, the two number one and number two city in the world, Angela, are Copenhagen and Vienna. Vienna's number one, Copenhagen's number two right now. Mm-hmm. So what do they do there? Well, if you go there, you'll see what they did. And it's what we need to do, which is, the mid-rise housing, the avenues and corridors, the blow out the exclusionary zoning, streamline the approvals process. And actually, interestingly enough, both of those cities incinerate like crazy.
Interesting.
The city of Vienna actually imports garbage from Italy to burn in its incinerators.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that? I mean, just think about that for a minute. But that's the number one city in the world. And people that go to Vienna, I've been to Vienna, like, what's not to love about the place, right? And Copenhagen. I mean, Copenhagen's, their redevelopment of their portlands, the Nordhaven project. I mean, it's just beautifully done, really well done. And but the way they did it is fascinating. I mean, the first thing they did was they built an LRT, right, out into the area to be redeveloped. Here, it's almost like an afterthought, right?
Yeah.
And that's why, Sidewalk, I mean, that's one of the things Sidewalk got right is Sidewalk wanted to build that themselves, and then they'd hand it over to the TTC. And the reason they wanted to do that is if they left it up to the TTC, it wouldn't get done.
So what I'm hearing is that there's these plans in place, these policies in place, but you want to see more action.
Yeah, it's, the trick in anything, Angela, is of course with any good plan is implementing the plan.
Right.
So I think there's work that needs to be done on the plan. I think the objectives, the problem, I think, has been clearly exposed or laid out, through the task force report and other reports. I think anyone that knows anything about this knows what needs to be done for the most part in different areas. But now we've got to do it. And then it's in the doing that you can, in the doing, you got to measure success. How do you measure success in the doing, right? And to measure success and, of course, to make good decisions, you need good information. And right now, the province, the information from various municipalities and even within municipalities, so obviously some smaller ones, it's not a problem to that extent, but they don't really know what's happening, and there really isn't a plan about, okay, well, what does this mean for us, and what do we need to do here, and so on, relative to hard numbers. So, for example, of that 1.5 million, how many units of housing are needed in various municipalities again, right? And then what's the plan to enable that to happen? So, for example, if you really break it down, you'd say, okay, well, how many units of housing we're going to get out of laneways, garden suites, avenues and corridors, purpose-built rental, and you've got to target those things. And so Toronto might say, well, we need, 20,000 units of purpose-built rental housing built, right? Mm-hmm. What are we doing right now? What's happening right now? And how do we get from A to B? Mm-hmm. That kind of planning. In fact, other jurisdictions do that.
Right.
Where they break it down to the municipal level, and each municipality is expected to, they got to do it.
Right. Okay.
And then there's the, again, obviously the digitization stuff. There's different elements here that come into play that are very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And this development and growth division, has it been, I'm not really familiar with it, has it been promised by the mayor, or? Yeah,
the mayor has announced it.
Okay.
And he's announced changes with respect to exclusionary zoning.
Would that, in your opinion, deal with some of these issues that you've talked about at the municipal level?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Like the strong mayor stuff will give the mayor the powers that a mayor should really have. And there are examples of this in other jurisdictions, but the best one I can think of was Mayor Bloomberg in New York City. When he became the mayor, all his department heads reported to him, and they did some really amazing work there. And that was considered one of the best administrations of city management generally, but certainly with respect to the city of New York.
And speaking of the mayoral race and John Tory, Don, you've got some insights on that, and you watched the mayoral debate that just happened, I think, a couple days ago.
Yeah, the Board of Trade held a debate on the 17th. There have been a number of them. Tory has only gone to a couple. That's Mayor John Tory. So he's by far the front runner. The main one poll that's come out, he was choice of over 50%. Next was Gil Penaloza. He's a ex-commissioner of Parks and Recreation in Bogota, Colombia. He's got lots of ideas about city building, and so Penaloza and three others joining Tory. So it's really a debate like this. It's really a discussion, a referendum on the past 8 years of Tory's leadership, and he's got the benefit of incumbency. Realistically, when you're talking about a debate like this, it's just a matter of, is there anyone who can come close? The polls say they can't. So it's everybody's looking at the track record that Tory has. Our stakeholders obviously are interested in what's he saying about transit, what's he and about housing and about leadership and finances. So those are kind of some main themes that come up at the Board of Trade. So they're interested in those themes as well. So so obviously, so what do our stakeholders? What are they interested in? Well, in this case, Tory talks about he's got a transit plan. He's got all three levels of government. They're all together $28 billion on the subway and the LRT plans. Four new projects. The Ford government introduced that, but Tory has said I was a key player in bringing them all together. He was criticized. He has an old smart track plan. Somebody said, "Where's that?" But obviously, the new massive spending on transit is taking the place of that. He's taking ownership of that, and and I think that's something. Continuation of that is what our stakeholders want to see. They don't want to see people. They wouldn't want to see a new mayor coming in. Tory says, and chipping away at it, revising the plan, taking parts and and changing it. That was the main thing that Tory talked about. The fact that predictability and certainty in some of these things is what you'll get with him. You certainly will. He even mentioned, he doesn't have a great vision. He's got a good track record. He talks about in transit, and on housing, of course, that's a hot button issue.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of Chloe Brown. She's the polls listed her at 6%. She was very combative in this debate, and she said, both she and Penalosi said, your housing platforms. Everybody talks about affordability in Toronto. Everybody's leaving Toronto. The opponents are saying, so your housing program policies are a failure. And surprisingly, he wrote something just in August, just when Toronto Council signs off on 24,000 new homes. So, so what most people may consider a huge affordability crisis in Toronto, and which it is for many people. Mm-hmm. But in the last year, Toronto City Council approved more than 24,000 new homes, including over 2,000 through various city initiatives. So a lot of these initiatives, the Housing TO Plan, Housing Now, a new multi-residential acquisition program. So those are all introduced under Tory's leadership. So, he can claim, and he has one more thing. He has a 5-point plan to take it the next step. So he's under the gun in this debate for housing and transit, but he's relying on his track record, and it's pretty safe to say that'll see him through to a third term.
One thing you mentioned before we started recording is this whole strong mayor initiative. And to my uneducated mind, I would think that if somebody said, hey, here's more power, any mayor would go, yeah, sure, sounds good to me. But I don't know if that's the case, and I don't know what the stakeholders think of that either.
Yeah, do you know what that's about? So that's obviously a provincial initiative. It's a way to get, it's based on housing. Mm-hmm. Lots of problems in getting housing approved, a number of things that are roadblocks, bottlenecks in terms of expediting new housing. So starting off, it's only Ottawa and Toronto. The two mayors will be getting those powers. It's been approved. Tory, wasn't championing mm-hmm. this at all, but he's kind of reluctantly accepting it. I just heard a discussion this morning. He says, yeah, my style is conciliation, collaboration, working with people. He said, if you talk to me in 4 years, I bet I will not have used the powers very often. Where I may use them is in my housing and transit plan. If anyone dares interfere with my transit plan, he'll use some of the new powers in the strong mayor's legislation to keep that on track. And in housing, if there's interference or impediments to him unfolding his 5-point plan, which includes more housing and more missing middle housing, more infill density, also expediting permitting. So some measures like that. If there's opposition to that, that's where he may step in. So he's not going to brandish these new powers and flex his muscles, kind of thing. He's going to remain, a collaborator. So that's one issue. Another issue, Warren, that arose during the campaign. And Angela was alluding to it too. Risk transfer in contracts. There was an impasse. City of Toronto withdrew a couple of tenders this summer for road projects. Just there couldn't be a meeting of the minds. They didn't like what was being offered by bidders, and it all comes down to how to deal with rising costs. There are mechanisms and let's just say Infrastructure Ontario, City of Toronto, and stakeholders and bidders have not found common ground on how to put together these contracts and dealing with escalating costs. So that's something that's come up. these major road contracts will be put back to tender, re-tendered in different format. But that's something I know if you're talking about what stakeholders want. I know a bunch of our stakeholders have been holding meetings, trying to get through this. So it's it's a major issue, and of course, in a period of lots of uncertainties and especially rising costs, that's something it's we're not past some of those problems. So that's another issue that it's come along during this campaign period, and the next mayor of Toronto, possibly, most probably, John Tory will have to address that. Let's clean up the tendering issue and finding ways of finding some common ground.
Okay, and Angela, did you want to add anything to that risk transfer discussion?
Yeah, so I think the common thread that I've heard from the stakeholders was that it's not going to take one thing to solve this issue. Mm-hmm. So, the risk transfer needs to be addressed, and with the strong mayor's power and maybe this development and growth division and things like that, working together, collaborative models and those things, that's going to be the key to solving the housing issue. That's what I'm hearing. There's not one, silver bullet. It's going to take a lot of different things coming together to make that happen.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us, both of you. And everybody get out and vote on October 24th. I now know what the date is. So thanks.